and welcome to the Rockbridge Roundtable. My name is G. Lee. I'm joined by my good friend Cam Fuller, and we are your hosts today. As you reminisce in the wise words of Steve Goodman, who wrote one of the greatest songs of all time several decades ago, the Cubs are going to win today, or rather they won yesterday to capture their first World Series win in over 108 years. You can't see us, but I'm just smiling from ear to ear. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. I'm sure many people have waited much longer than me, but it's impossible to be unhappy today for Cubs fans around the world. But in general, just a brilliant series, an incredible Game 7. High stress, high intensity. It would have been devastating if the Cubs didn't pull it off, but even if they didn't, that's just got to go down as a phenomenal game of baseball. And at the end of the day, I think in the World Series, at the pinnacle of the sport, that's what you're looking for.
Totally. I've been looking at so many different websites today, looking at all of the headlines just because it's so much fun after a huge win like that. And pretty much everyone, maybe just because, there hasn't been a lot of time to kind of think it over, but I've seen so many people saying that was the greatest Game 7 of a World Series of all time. And personally, I don't know the history of Game 7s probably as best as some of the professionals, but if they're saying that that's the case, then I'm totally in a consensus with them. So,
and especially with the Cubs, there's so much history with that team, the organization, and the fans. I've seen a lot of really powerful pictures on Twitter of like sons who promised their fathers that they would enjoy the World Series together. And so there's one picture that sticks out to me. It's like an 80-year-old man who's has a portable radio sitting in front of his father's grave, just enjoying the game with his past father. It's stories like that can really move people to appreciate sports to their full potential. But now focusing our attention back onto the field, every baseball player, every Little League baseball player has that dream of pitching in the ninth inning, of getting that save, or in this case the 10th inning. But as Terry Francona and Joe Madden pieced together this World Series, you can kind of tell that, or maybe you can't tell. Maybe it's just me. There is definitely a new era of baseball coming into town. You might say with Kyle Hendricks, who is dealing, getting pulled after 4 2/3. Aroldis Chapman and other pitchers like Cody Allen and Andrew Miller for the Indians being placed into the game at the 5th and 6th innings and going for more than just one inning. And so, Cam, what do you think about this potentially new era of baseball, especially in terms of pitching and coordinating a lineup?
I think it's really impressive because, I think people are starting, it's gotten to the point where over time, you see it in almost every sport. You're starting to see it now in basketball. I think the biggest kind of thing that you can notice in both is that people are offensively getting much better. The offensive production is going up. You look at basketball. You have guys like Steve Curry, obviously or Steph Curry, that are beginning to are breaking records, but not just breaking them, but destroying them. And now you're going to go over to baseball, and you see this similar with more and more people getting better hitting averages, better home run, more home runs, I should say. But I think it's really impressive that these managers have been able to see that and are starting to kind of combat it by doing different styles of putting their pitchers in, at times that in the past really wouldn't have helped them at all. But now it's something that you have to do. So I think it's incredibly interesting. It's something that we're definitely going to see, continue and probably evolve over the next few years. But even with, more technology coming into the game with things like the ability to review calls and even I've heard possibility of doing instead of having an umpire call strikes, ideas of people actually going and making computer simulations that can do that for them. These are all things that are in the future of baseball, are already there in the game currently. So there's a lot of things kind of on the horizon, but it's definitely exciting.
And it'll also be interesting to see how the influence of this postseason will influence the future regular seasons. Because if you're sitting in middle of July and the most contentious game that you're going to be playing in is, against a division rival, and you're not really playing for anything at that point, are you going to put in on Andrew Miller or Aroldis Chapman into a 6th or 7th inning spot? And so moving forward, it'll be very entertaining, very interesting to see just how baseball moves forward. But nevertheless, we experienced an incredible World Series and an awesome Game 7. Now moving from one professional sport to another, the NBA, to be honest, I feel like it's just simply been outshadowed by Major League Baseball. But now that baseball has sang its final song of 2016, we can focus our attention to the hardwood. Golden State was supposed to be just an unbelievable team, and they come out and they lose their first game. What was your reaction to that loss, first of all, Cam, and also how do you think the Warriors have bounced back, and how do you think they will continue to bounce back?
Well, I know very early on when I first heard about Durant going to the Golden State, I immediately said that Golden State was going to be an incredible team, maybe one of the best teams in NBA history. I do not think they're going to win an NBA championship, though. I think that they are going to be too inconsistent, and I think the game one showed that. Obviously, there's a lot of growing pains that come with implementing a future NBA Hall of Famer, but it's definitely something that I think is interesting because now obviously they are 3-1. They've just had some incredibly good games, somewhat close, but they're still winning, and they're doing it in Golden State fashion with big plays late, big threes late, and you're getting a lot of production all around the court. And also in that game one, they lost to a great Spurs team, so a team that I personally think has, as always in the pretty much over the past decade, always has a chance of coming out and winning the West. But still, I think that this team, it just goes to show that they have a lot to grow on. I think in the next few years, they're most definitely going to win a championship. Very similar to the big three that in Miami. But I just don't think that they're going to be able to do it right off the bat. I think there needs to be a little bit more time.
I think you can see that with the Knicks as well. Nobody wants to be that guy who takes all the shots, because then it's so easy to label a player as selfish when you're surrounded by all these big name free agents that the organization picked up over the offseason. And so the chemistry isn't quite there. I think the trust isn't quite there amongst the teammates. But for the most part, I think it'll be a very exciting NBA regular season, and a lot tighter than people think.
Yeah.
You have these quiet teams like maybe even Utah or Charlotte who could go on a run in the middle of the season and really switch things up in the conference and divisional races. And so I think it'll be an entertaining season on the hardwood. Meanwhile, on the ice, again, kind of outshadowed by the other sports, especially by the World Series. But the National Hockey League has, kind of been the National Hockey League. The Canadians have had a surprisingly impressive start. But then again, the same goes with the NBA. It's so young in the season, so early in the season. You can't really judge the entirety of a season based on the first 10 games, and so, or in the NBA's case, even 4 or 5 games. And so, moving forward, I think it'll be interesting. I think the law of averages will come back to support teams like the Blackhawks, teams like the Red Wings, even the Predators or the Hurricanes, who have been successful in recent years. And so it'll be an entertaining and competitive regular season and postseason. Meanwhile, a season that has already, kind of entered into the swing of things, the National Football League, focusing mostly on the Chiefs, as we are in Columbia, Missouri. Jamal Charles just announced that he would be having surgery on his knee, which has been bothering him for a while. How do you think that will affect the dynamic of the Chiefs moving forward this season?
It's terrifying. For maybe one of the most inconsistent offenses in the NFL, you're going to, and on top of, so we find this out, and then a few days later,
Alex Smith.
Yeah. Alex Smith gets hurt. And then on top of that, Spencer Ware just announced today that he did not pass the NFL's concussion test. So we have, and that's that's saying something because I think a lot of people, unless you're really into fantasy football, did not know how big of a deal Spencer Ware was to that offense. He's been just a very consistent guy, getting great rushing yards for the team. He was averaging about 110 rushing yards per game, which is just almost unheard of for a backup who really hasn't seen much playing time over the past few years that he's been with the Chiefs. But nonetheless, there's still some hope for him to come and play on Sunday. But still, the Chiefs. I mean, this may be kind of the beginning of the end for this season. I don't think anyone really necessarily had high hopes for this being the year or anything, but nonetheless, this is not looking very good for them.
Yeah, it is interesting to see, however, that the Chiefs are 5-2 right now and are a meager third place in their division.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gotta agree with you there, Cam. To hinge your offense on Nick Foles, Travis Kelce, Jerry Maclin, and Chenandrick West. Nothing against those guys, but especially in an Andy Reid type offensive style, I just can't see that team putting points on the board very often moving forward.
Yeah.
One more point about the NFL. We've kind of overlooked this, I think, just because of all the action that's happening on the field. But so many players, it feels like, are retiring earlier than they could have. And now we have players like Percy Harvin, who everyone thought had a couple years left in the tank, and here they come back. And so we have players like Andre Johnson, who I'll admit was getting old, but especially Marshawn Lynch and Calvin Johnson, guys who you really thought had a lot left in the tank, but have decided to leave. What do you think about that? And also, what do you think about guys like Percy Harvin deciding to come back into the league?
Well, I think it's really pretty telling of what a lot of things kind of leading up to the past few seasons have been telling us. There's been a lot more attention to concussions and to injuries in football.
General, yeah.
And you're seeing a lot more guys in programs, even coming from the collegiate level all the way down to Pop Warner, and then of course up to the professional ranks. You're seeing much more attention to these, and I think this increased attention has allowed a lot more players to realize what's happening to their bodies, and I think it's freaking some guys out. I know that there's been a lot of stories come out about football players saying that they never want their kids to play football because they know what a toll it takes on you both mentally and physically. And so I think you're going to see a lot more players beginning to retire early. Guys like Marshawn Lynch, I think he's a pretty incredible story because he has been saving up pretty much almost all of his money that he's earned from the NFL and has been taking, and his the wage that he's been living off of has been what he's gotten from ads and ad revenue and stuff like that, being sponsors for certain people. And so it's incredibly impressive that he's being so smart with his money, and I hope that a lot more NFL players follow suit, even if they don't decide to leave early. But I think you're going to see a lot more players deciding that football just isn't for them.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up Lynch because he's notorious, or he was notorious for just being this extremely physical. You can't bring me down with arm tackles kind of guy. Same with Calvin Johnson. I mean, he was nicknamed Megatron, and for good reason. And so you have these big physical guys who are deciding to tap out earlier in their careers, and that's interesting, especially comparing to baseball, where you have this brilliant swan songs from guys like David Ortiz and David Ross, who are old and still productive. And they simply have to leave because they're 39, 40 years old and their bodies just can't take it anymore. Yep. But you compare baseball to football, you compare the ages of these guys retiring to the ages of these other guys retiring, and it is interesting and intriguing for sure. We'll see what happens in the future. Now moving from the professional ranks to the amateur ranks, we look at these past couple weeks in sports of Rockbridge High School. A couple seasons did come to an end. Football, most notably, dropped their first game in districts, I believe, to Fort Zumwalt.
Yep.
And so that season has come to an end. It's never easy to see these seniors who have just poured the last 4 years of their lives and their souls and their energy into this program, into this school. It's never easy to watch them go. But it's sports, and it's just it's an unforgiving first love for so many athletes. On the other hand, we have a couple of sports that are continuing to make their push for a state title. The boys soccer team, after two just, I don't know how to explain it, just heart attack producing games in the district tournament against rival Hickman and rival Sedalia Smith Cotton, advanced to the sectional game against Lee Summit West, backed by two impressive goals from senior captain Drew Stanowski. The Bruins will be taking on Ozark this Saturday. And the game, despite being hosted by the Bruins, is actually going to be played at Battle. And that's because the facilities at Rockbridge will not be able to be used because of this huge construction project in which the bleachers are being torn down, the scoreboard is being redone, the press box is being redone, so there's no connection even to the press box and to the scoreboard, which I guess still is an advantage for the Bruins because, it's still in Columbia. But disappointing, I guess, is a good way to put just the timing of this construction project, which albeit is necessary, but it is just a little unfortunate for the seniors who I'm sure wanted to play this game on their home turf. And of course, the boys swimming and diving team will be competing at the state level.
Looking for a repeat of last year's state championship. I think that some earlier season third and fourth places against rivals Rockhurst and
as well.
Are telling of what is possibly going to come out of the state championship. But nonetheless, I mean, the team has also had some really incredible output from some nationally ranked swimmers. So I think that anything it could happen, especially when we get down to it this coming weekend. So
absolutely, it'll be definitely interesting. And to wrap it up, we have a couple sports starting up. Most notably, I think the boys basketball team, most anticipated in the school, the boys basketball team. Just a lot of young talent, a lot of young energy. Not a whole lot of size, but hey, Golden State didn't need size last year to win 70-plus games, and so we'll see what head coach Jim Scanlon can do with his young squad. And we'll keep you updated on seasons all around the school, the state, and the country. We appreciate you tuning in and joining us today. My name is Ji Ho Lee.
I'm Cam Fuller.
And this has been another week of the Rockbridge Roundtable. See you next week.
See ya.
How long was